Hey guys, welcome back. So, sure my mic's on here. So part of my 10-part mega service series, I've decided to include a Ecodiesel versus Hemi little debate. Is it worth getting the Ecodiesel over the Hemi? So I've got some figures on my laptop here, and I'll just start off by saying I'm in Canada, so a lot of the figures are going to be in liters per 100K, and it's all going to be pretty much in Canadian dollars. So I'll try and include miles and USD figures where I can. So yeah, let's get into it. So basically, I've had my truck for 200,000 kilometers, which is roughly 124,000 miles over the last 5 years, almost to the day. So some figures I found on Fuelie for a couple of guys up here in Canada, averaging 10.6 liters per 100K, which is roughly 22 miles per gallon. The cost for me to own the truck, if I was getting that kind of fuel economy, which is the average apparently, over 200,000 kilometers, I would have been paying $26,000 in fuel over 5 years. And that's at $1.23 per liter, which is kind of on the high scale. My truck in particular, because I've deleted the emissions, I'm getting a little bit of a boost in fuel savings. And I also do a lot of highway driving, so you've got to take all these figures with a grain of salt. I do a lot of highway driving, so I'm averaging 8.4 liters per 100K, which is roughly 28 miles per gallon. So for me, I've paid $22,000 Canadian over 5 years, 200,000 kilometers for my truck. Okay, so compare that to 26 for the average, and it might be up and down. It depends on the person's driving habits, obviously. And so I've saved some money there, whether it be from the delete or probably more likely just my driving style, right? I don't race down the highway. I'm the kind of guy who just more or less sits in the slow lane and putts along at 110 kilometers an hour. So if I wanted a fast truck, or if I want to go fast, I'll just hop on my motorcycle, right? When you buy a diesel truck, I don't know, personally to me it doesn't really make sense to be hammering it all over the city, but some guys like to have some fun every now and then. But so yeah, I've paid $22,000 over 5 years, and I'll jump over to the Hemi. I found a couple averages up here in Canada, averaging 16 liters per 100K, which is roughly 14.7 miles per gallon. Obviously the 5.7 Hemi, it's a much larger engine, gas. It's going to use quite a bit more fuel. So with that being said, for me, if I had that engine for 200,000 kilometers, I would have been paying roughly $32,000 in fuel over the 5 years, and that's at 96 cents a liter, because I'm sure you guys are all aware, diesel is quite a bit more than gas right now. It has been over the especially last 3 years. It's so you're saving actually on the gas, but your fuel economy obviously isn't going to be as good. So we'll just keep going down here, stay on the fuel talk here, because there's a lot of numbers going on here, so I'm hoping that I'm not losing everybody. So down on the Pentastar, I just grabbed a quick little figure for the Pentastar. I found several guys with 12 liters per 100K, which is 19.6 miles per gallon. And for me, if I had the Pentastar over 200,000 kilometers, I would have been paying $22,000 in fuel. So roughly the same as the Ecodiesel for that engine. So now you got to factor in, obviously, you've got your fuel, you've got to get oil changes, right? I'm sure everybody's heard the stories of like the insanely priced oil changes for the Ecodiesel. And it's true, in Canada, in Ontario at least, $200 to $300 from a dealer for an oil change, which is like mind-boggling. Truck takes 10 liters of oil. Biggest thing is the Mopar filters. They're still like $70 or something like that. So if you're going to the dealer, I've averaged it at $250 per oil change. For me, I would have been doing 12 and a half oil changes. That would be $3,123 in oil changes over 200,000 kilometers, and that's on 16,000 kilometer intervals, right? Or I think it's 10,000 miles. You know, you can run the oil further in a diesel historically than a gas, so you know, you've got to factor that in as well. The oil changes are more money, but you can go a little further with them. So if you go to the dealer over 200,000 kilometers, you're paying $31.25. Now compare that to a Hemi, which I don't know the exact figures for Hemi because I don't own one, but I went online, I tried finding a couple of dealers here in Ontario. North Star oil change, $110 per oil change, and they're recommending the intervals at 10,000 kilometers, so you're not going as far, but they're way cheaper. Now with that 10,000 kilometer range, I would have been paying $2,200 over 200,000 kilometers if I had that engine with that interval. Okay, hopefully I'm not losing you here. Whole pile of numbers, it's crazy. Now for me, myself, because I've done my own oil changes, I don't use the Mopar filters. I've always used, pretty much stayed as far away from Mopar as I can. Not saying they're bad products, they're high quality, it's just, for me it was not worth it, for sure. So I've got aftermarket EcoGuard filters. I've always done my oil changes, so I've got my oil changes down from $250 down to $96. So for me, I've only paid $1,200 over the last 5 years in oil changes on my truck. So I've saved money compared to the dealer just because I do my own maintenance, right? So overall, I mean, at the end of the day, $31.25 in oil changes versus $2,200 in oil changes, you're still saving money in oil changes with the Hemi because they're just that much cheaper. There's no way around it. Now you got your fuel filters, right? Diesels need high filtration, right? The injectors are very, very, very expensive on this truck. I haven't had to deal with that yet, knock on wood. Fuel filters, but you know, I didn't get the figures for a dealer, unfortunately, because I've always done my own fuel filters. $24 a filter at Rock Auto. I've done 5.5 filter changes over 200,000 kilometers, so I've paid $130 in fuel filter changes, which is really pretty reasonable. So then the last thing you got to factor in with the diesel is diesel exhaust fluid, right? All modern diesels now have a emission system. Excuse me. An emission system, and you've got to add that cat piss in, right? So unfortunately, well, fortunately for me, I ripped that shit out of my truck, so I don't have any figures really for myself on what I've spent on DEF because I deleted the truck pretty early on. So I had to jump on the internet. I went to Edmunds, which is a pretty respectable American car website. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with it. They've got a test Ecodiesel, and over 58,000 miles, or sorry, 36,000 miles, they spent $108 American. So for me, so 36,000 miles, that's 58,000 kilometers. Times that by 3.4 because I have 200,000 kilometers. That makes $369 American in DEF if I was to use their figures on my truck, or roughly, you know, $500 Canadian over 5 years for the DEF fluid if I had it. So, you know, you got to tack that on as well, along with the fuel, filters, and you know, and then you got to tack on the biggest cost, which is the actual diesel engine itself, which is I don't have my book with me, unfortunately. I can't remember exactly what I paid, but you know, you're looking at least a $5,000 upgrade. So I've saved, according to Fuely, it looks like I've saved about $10,000 on fuel over 5 years. So, you know, you subtract 5 to 7 for that engine, you subtract another 500 for the DEF, the fuel filters, the engine oil, and pretty much breaking even from what I can tell. You might save a couple of grand over 5 years, but at the end of the day, it's almost the same to run the Hemi versus the Ecodiesel in terms of a cost, right? So the reason I wanted the diesel in the first place was I wanted a slightly better towing capacity. The capacity actually isn't any better with the Ecodiesel in terms of pounds and what's really on paper. But I can tell you from experience, I've hooked up to 10,000 pounds with my truck, and you know, I average 8.4 liters, like I was saying. I did a 300 kilometer trip with 10,000 pounds, and I was averaging 12.5, which is pretty reasonable. I'll put a little, insert a little clip there for however many mpg that is. You know, if you had a Hemi and you hooked up to 10,000 pounds and you were getting 16 liters per 100k, I can imagine that's going to go up quite a bit. You know, diesels historically are better for towing than gas, just because of the efficiency and the power, and they make a lot of low end torque, right? So yeah, so that's the breakdown. Anyways, just you know, I wish it's a really hard comparison to make. There's a lot of variables. You know, these figures I got off fuel, you might not even reflect what you guys are experiencing out there. I can tell you the dash, the truck's internal fuel consumption reading is pretty much on par with what I see on Fuelie. Like Fuelie's telling me 8.4 liters. I'm seeing somewhere around 8. You know, I've seen it as low as 7 when I'm just putting along. But you know, 8.4 is pretty accurate, I would say. So you know, at the end of the day, should you get the Ecodiesel over the Hemi for cost? Probably not. You know, really, at the end of the day, if you're just going to be getting the Ecodiesel to save a buck, the figures don't really jive with that. The long term of the diesel, I'm hoping at least, you know, I get another 200,000 kilometers out of it. Diesels are supposed to be more reliable than gas, especially in the older days. You know, you hear guys getting million-mile engines, right? The old 12-valve Cummins. It's not really the case anymore, especially with the modern emissions, right? That's more or less the reason why I got rid of mine. So you know, you got to take that with a grain of salt as well. When you lose an Ecodiesel engine, at least here in Ontario, I can tell you, you're looking at about $10,000 Canadian to get it swapped out. It's quite a bit of time. The engines themselves are hard to get because they're not nearly as popular. You know, there's probably a waiting list at your Chrysler for that engine, which is probably not a good sign. And then, you know, the thing about the Hemi too is you got to think it's been around forever, right? Like literally, it's been around forever. So there's going to be a lot more of those. You can get to a lot more smaller shops. Say if you did lose an engine, a lot more shops are going to be equipped to swap a Hemi engine out than an Ecodiesel for sure. So you got to make your own comparison at the end of the day. For me, it looks kind of like I saved a little bit of money because my driving style, and I've deleted, I've saved a teeny bit in fuel. I'm hoping the longevity is what really pays for it at the end of the day. And I just like the diesel, I like the torque. It's not fast, but there's a lot of power there, right? The diesel makes more power. At the end of the day, like more torque, right? So, you know, with my engine, I'm getting, with my tune rather, I'm supposed to be getting, haven't dynoed it, but roughly 500 pounds of torque, which is more or less what I was after, right? Like I said, if I wanted to go fast, I'd just hop on my motorcycle. So that's my comparison. Hopefully that answers a little bit of questions on some guys. I get asked this quite a bit, you know, why didn't you just get the Hemi? The price of diesel is so insane. Gas is cheap. Right now, as you know, early 2019, gas prices especially have dropped considerably. Like they've been down to the 80 cents per liter, which if you're paying $1.23 for diesel and then 80 cents for gas, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're saving money because it's just diesel's just so insane, right? So wherever you are, I mean, maybe if diesel's a little bit cheaper in your area, you're going to be able to go further on a tank. So I know for me, I can get 1,200 kilometers out of a tank. Just doing the highway stuff, which is I think roughly 800 and 830 miles, somewhere around there, per tank, which is pretty good, you know. Big fill up, it's a 100-liter tank. So yeah, anyways, hopefully that answers some of your questions. If you own an Ecodiesel and you're looking to do some maintenance, I'm starting a 10-part dubbing it the Mega service, basically covering everything from the engine oil filter, fuel filter, the differentials, transfer case, transmission, some of the emissions equipment we're going to go over and clean up, or possibly rip out if you're into that. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. 10-part video series coming up. So if you do have an Ecodiesel, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.